Hi, I'm Alex Caravello from Landlord's Rent. Welcome back for part 4 of our mini-course on how to maximise your rental profits. In the last video, we looked at taking control of your rent collection. In today's video, we're going to discuss how to manage your tenants. In the previous videos, we discussed preparing your tenancy paperwork, referencing your prospective tenants, advertising and marketing your property, and establishing your direct debit rent collection service. So in this video, we're going to briefly discuss the following topics: conducting viewings, taking application fees, the referencing process and application paperwork, protecting the security deposit, tenant check-in, regular inspections, tenant check-out, and returning the security deposit. Okay, let's get started at the beginning, conducting viewings. I always arrange block viewings, normally on a Saturday morning. Block viewings cut right down on the amount of time spent travelling to and from a rental property, but more importantly, they create a sense of urgency with your prospective tenants. By staggering viewings 15 to 20 minutes apart, I'm normally just getting down to brass tacks with one applicant when the doorbell rings for the next viewing. So I normally take this opportunity to say something like, I've had a lot of interest in the property and I operate a first come first served policy. If you're genuinely serious about applying, then I suggest you pay your application fee before you leave, so I can then tell the next person that they're second in the queue. What would you like to do? If they're serious, they usually agree. Or they might say, I don't have the cash on me. So I suggest they visit the cash machine and come back before the next viewing is finished. First come, first served means just that. Irrespective of the previous viewer's answer, I usually tell the next viewer that the previous one is returning with the cash for their application fee in 15 to 20 minutes, but that I operate a first come, first served basis. So if they like the property and want to be first in line, they know what to do. Let me tell you, this technique really works. It separates the serious applicants from the time wasters and normally results in me leaving a viewing with more than one application fee. When I take the application fee, I provide the prospective tenant with a copy of my tenancy application form. I draw their attention to the information that must be provided, and also the circumstances under which their application fee will be returned or withheld if they decide not to proceed. By the way, I always return unsuccessful applicants' application fees ASAP. Not to do so would be unfair and probably illegal. Okay, on to referencing and application paperwork. You will need to provide your prospective tenants with an application form. If you are intending to use the services of a tenant referencing service, they will provide you with a form. If you're intending to do your own tenant referencing and want an example of what information to ask for, go to www.tenantverify.co.uk and download an example residential tenancy application form. I also advise taking the make, model and registration number of their car and asking whether it has any outstanding finance. This information will prove very useful if you need to make a county court money claim against them. I also advise you request references from the applicant's employer, existing landlord and previous landlord. If you ask for a guarantor, don't forget to ask them to fill in an application form as well. It's also essential that you see a photo ID, like passport, driving licence or student card. I advise you take a photocopy of their ID as well. So in the event that you need to enforce a county court judgment against the tenant, you can show the bailiff a copy of their ID. You'd be surprised how often the bailiff is simply told at the doorstep, John Smith, never heard of him. Okay, let's move on to protecting the security deposit. Don't forget, under UK tenancy deposit protection legislation, all new security deposits must be protected within 14 days of receipt, using one of the statutory deposit protection schemes. Make sure you carefully follow the instructions of your chosen scheme administrator to ensure you properly comply with the legislation. I suggest your application form makes it abundantly clear that you are not taking a security deposit at the point of application, but that it is a fee. Otherwise, you could fall foul of the 14-day protection rule if the tenant were to argue that the money they gave you was towards their security deposit. Okay, assuming now you've chosen your tenant, taken their first month's rent and security deposit, and agreed a moving in date, the next step will be to move the tenant into the property. When you check in your new tenant, you will need to do the following things. Read and sign all outstanding paperwork like the tenancy agreement, direct debit mandate, etc. and provide a copy to your tenant. Check through the property with your tenant and sign 2 copies of the property inventory. Show them how to operate any appliances, the heating, smoke alarm, carbon monoxide alarm, burglar alarm. Show them where to find the fuse box, gas and electricity and water meters, and the water stopcock. Take gas, electricity and water meter readings. Give instructions for where and when to put the bins out. Tell them where to forward any mail that comes in your name. Give them your contact details and emergency call-out instructions. Tell them when to expect their first periodic inspection. Take the balance of any outstanding rent, security deposit, etc. Hand over the keys and wish them luck. There's a lot to remember, so it's probably worth printing off a check-in tick box form to make sure you don't forget anything. At this stage, I recommend providing the tenant with an instructions for outgoing tenants form, so that it makes clear what you expect to happen at the end of the tenancy. Okay, let's move on to regular inspections. I recommend performing your property inspections religiously every 3 months. Inspections are your opportunity to intelligence gather and to make sure everything is okay with the tenant and with the property. Ask your tenant how they are and if everything is okay. You'll be amazed how such a leading question can often lead to the tenant opening up about problems they've got, like job worries, problems with the neighbours, saying they might be looking to move. Knowledge is power, so it's always in your interest to know what's going on. When checking the property, always keep a lookout for damage, overloaded plug sockets, over-occupancy, subletting, signs of smoking, drug use, etc. Okay, on to the tenant checkout. When your tenant contacts you to give notice of their intention to end the tenancy, you should send them an instructions for outgoing tenants form, detailing everything you expect the tenants to do before they leave, standards of cleanliness, etc. I tend to arrange a pre-checkout inspection about a fortnight before their moving date, just to go over what is required. I then write to the tenant to say something like, as agreed in today's pre-checkout inspection, you must do the following before you vacate the property, and then provide them with a list. I also take this opportunity to document that if these issues aren't actioned before they leave, it could result in deductions from their security deposit. On the last day of their tenancy, I perform the checkout inspection, using the notes of my pre-checkout inspection as a guide. The checkout process is basically the reverse of the check-in process, so you can just use the same form again, this time starting from the bottom. Ask the tenant to sign your checkout inspection form to acknowledge any agreed items that need rectifying. This will also help you if you need to rely on it in the event of a deposit dispute. Okay, lastly, let's look at returning the security deposit. Hopefully, having followed all the advice in this video, your tenant will have left your property in tip-top condition and ready for your incoming tenant. However, if there are any items of damage or cleaning that need doing, you may need to provide your tenant with quotes for the work. I normally work on the basis that if the work has to be completed before a new tenant can move in, I just get on with it and apply to deduct the amount from the outgoing tenant's security deposit. If the work is less urgent or very expensive, I normally provide 2 quotes. Assuming you've agreed with the outgoing tenant whether any deductions are appropriate, under the tenancy deposit protection legislation rules, you should return the tenant's security deposit or the agreed balance within 10 days of it being requested. I normally try to return the agreed deposit amount within 5 to 7 days of the tenant leaving. If you can't reach an agreement with the tenant on the amount of appropriate deductions, you must immediately return the undisputed amount to the tenant and allow them to lodge a dispute with the tenancy deposit protection scheme. You will then be contacted by the scheme administrator and asked to forward them the disputed amount until the dispute is resolved. Okay, that's it for today's video. Hopefully now you're really getting stuck into learning how to maximise your rental profits. Keep an eye on your inbox over the next few days for the 5th video in this mini course. To your continued success.